Right now, somewhere in suburban America, a homeowner is being fined, not for a crime, not for hurting anyone, for building a fence around land they legally own, paid for, and pay taxes on every single year. The fine started at $100 a day. It has been running for weeks. Meanwhile, in Mexico City, a family just finished building a 10-foot concrete wall around their front yard. No permit, no committee, no approval from anyone, just a wall around their own property, the way people everywhere else on Earth have always lived. So here is the question nobody in your neighborhood is asking. How did America become the one place on Earth where fencing your own land is treated like a problem? The answer starts with a man most Americans have never heard of. And by the end of this video, you will never look at your front yard the same way again. His name was Andrew Jackson Downing. He was not a politician, not a lawmaker, just a gardener from a small town in New York with a very strong opinion about what American homes should look like from the street. In 1841, he published a book, One Man, No Legal Authority Over Anyone, and yet that book quietly shaped the physical design of nearly every suburb built in America for the next 2 centuries. Downing believed that the way your home looked from the outside revealed the moral character of the people living inside. An open lawn meant you were trustworthy. A fence meant you had something to hide. That one belief is the thread that connects everything that comes after. Before Downing, American homes had fences, practical, simple ones. Under the common law of the time, if your neighbor's livestock wandered onto your unfenced land and destroyed your crops, that was your problem. The fence was not a style choice. It was legal protection. A clear boundary between your land and the street was simply part of what owning a home meant. Downing wanted to erase that entirely. His book argued that homes should sit on open lawns with nothing blocking the view from the road. Visible green space, he wrote, was a sign of order, civilization, and democratic values. He was not describing grand estates. He was talking about ordinary homes on ordinary streets. Fully open, fully visible, readable by anyone walking past. For a few decades, this was just an idea floating among wealthy landowners. It had no real power behind it. Then a world war ended, and everything changed fast. In 1945, millions of soldiers came home to a country that did not have enough houses for them. Cities were overcrowded. Families were doubling up in apartments. The government needed millions of affordable homes, and it needed them almost overnight. Enter William Levitt. Levitt figured out how to build houses the same way Henry Ford built cars. Standardized parts, repeated layouts, assembly line speed. In 1947, he broke ground in Nassau County, New York. Within 4 years, more than 17,000 nearly identical homes stood on what had been potato fields. Each one came with modern appliances, a small green front lawn, and one rule written directly into the ownership paperwork: no fences allowed. Levitt called it community building. Shared green space, he said, turned strangers into neighbors. What it actually was cheaper and faster to produce. Open lawns meant less construction work. A fenceless neighborhood photographed better for marketing brochures. The open front yard was a business decision dressed up as an American value. And then the federal government made it the national standard. The Federal Housing Administration was backing mortgages across the country. To qualify for that backing, new developments had to meet specific design guidelines. Those guidelines favored open layouts and broadly discouraged front yard fences. Developers who wanted government financing had every reason to build the Levittown way, not because buyers were asking for it, Because the money required it. In less than 10 years, the open suburb went from one man's philosophical preference to the physical default of American residential life. Now think about what this actually felt like for the families moving in. A veteran comes home from Europe. He has seen homes with fences, walls, gates. He buys his Levittown house for $8,000, puts $400 down with his GI Bill, and moves his family in. He notices there is no fence. His kids play near the street. He thinks about putting something up. He reads the paperwork. Fences are not allowed in the front yard. He accepts it. The house is affordable. Everyone around him is living the same way. So, it must be normal. What he does not know is that buried in that same paperwork is a clause barring non-white families from buying a home in his neighborhood. The open, identical, fenceless design was not simply an aesthetic choice. It was a conformity system. Every house the same, every lawn visible. Anyone who looked different or lived differently would stand out immediately. Those racial restrictions were struck down by the courts decades later, but the underlying logic did not disappear. It simply moved into the homeowners associations that replaced the original covenants. By 2024, nearly 370,000 homeowners associations governed over 77 million Americans, roughly 1 in 3 homes. About 2/3 of all newly built homes fall under some form of HOA rule today. These associations control the height of your grass, the color of your front door, whether you can park a work truck in your own driveway, and, very often, whether you are allowed to build a fence. Front yard fences are commonly restricted to 3 or 4 feet. In many communities, they are banned outright. In Maricopa County, Arizona, one homeowner installed a simple 4-foot fence around the front yard. Young children, a busy road, basic safety. The HOA disagreed. Fines climbed past $8,000. The fence came down under legal pressure. Here is the part nobody else talks about when they cover this topic. The American lawn care industry is worth around $105 billion a year. Fertilizer, mowing, irrigation, weed treatments, sod. Every part of that industry depends on one thing: Americans maintaining large, open, visible front lawns. A fenced front yard steps outside that system entirely. You could grow food in it. Let it go natural. Stop performing for the street. The manicured lawn disappears as a product. The open lawn is not just a historical accident. It is an actively maintained economic interest. The federal government created the template. HOAs enforce the rules. And a $100 billion industry profits quietly from the result every single season. 3 systems all pointing in the same direction. Your front yard stays open, your lawn stays visible, and the whole arrangement keeps running. Now, step back and look at what this design actually does to the person living inside it. If your front yard has no fence, your neighbors can see whether you mowed this week. Your HOA can check from the street whether your paint is peeling. Anyone driving past gets a clear view of whether you are keeping up. That is not a side effect of the design. That is the purpose of the design. Studies on suburban living show that homeowners in unfenced neighborhoods report significantly higher anxiety about exterior appearance and neighbor judgment than people whose properties have clear physical boundaries. The open yard does not feel like freedom to everyone. For many people, it feels like a stage they cannot step off. Every weekend, the mowing is not optional. It is a social obligation performed in full view of the street. In Germany, a fence between neighboring properties is considered a sign of mutual respect. Research there consistently shows that defined boundaries reduce conflict between neighbors rather than create it. In Japan, every residential plot is enclosed. Walls, screens, hedges. It is simply considered normal, not suspicious. A family behind a courtyard wall in either of those countries is not hiding anything. They are just living the way most of the world lives. But a family in suburban America who puts up a tall fence around their front yard gets a letter from the HOA within the week. That difference is not natural. It was built step by step from one man's opinion in 1841, through a developer's production shortcut in 1947, through decades of federal lending policy, and into the private rule books of 370,000 associations governing your neighborhood today. Andrew Jackson Downing had a belief. William Levitt turned it into a product. The federal government made it the price of a mortgage. And a $100 billion industry now profits quietly from maintaining the whole arrangement. You own the land. You pay the taxes on it every year. And in much of America, you still need committee approval to put a fence around the first 20 feet of it. Most people living inside that system have never once been asked if they agree with it. Now you know the system exists. And the next time you drive through a suburb and see that unbroken stretch of open lawn running from one house to the next, you will know exactly how it got there and who decided it should stay. If this changed the way you see something you have looked at your whole life, subscribe. Next week, we go inside another piece of ordinary American life that was quietly shaped by someone you have never heard of, for reasons that had nothing to do with you.